Good evening and a warm welcome to Rushcliffe Borough Council's corporate overview group. I would like to remind everyone that the meeting is being live streamed on YouTube. A recording of the meeting will be available afterwards on the council's YouTube channel. In addition, other people may film, record, post on social media or blog from this meeting. The use of any such images or sound recordings is not under the council's control. May I remind councillors to please switch off your microphone when you are not speaking. Thank you. Just to let everybody know, the following officers that we have with us tonight is Charlotte Cavanagh, Head of Corporate Services, Joanne Wilkinson, Strategic Human Resources Manager, and Katie Brennan, Senior Finance Business Partner. And the first item, as always on agendas, is any apologies for absence.
No, Councillor Williams, there's no apology this evening.
All present and correct. Yeah. So, thank you. Item 2, any declarations of interest? Do we have any? No. Item 3, the minutes of the meeting held on the 17th of June 2025. Did we have any actions from that meeting?
There are 2 actions, and I believe the information has already been circulated.
Thank you. So if all councillors are happy, could I just have a show of hands for approval to sign those minutes? That's fine. Okay. Item 4 is the Health and Safety Annual Report 2024 to 2025, and we've got Jo Wilkinson to present. Over to you. Thank you.
Thank you and good evening everyone. So this report sets out the Council's occupational health and safety performance for April 24 through to March 25. I'll just discuss some of the points of interest within the report. Firstly, just a bit to advise you of the change of delivery of service in health and safety, and that we recruited a permanent health and safety advisor working 18.5 hours a week into the role. Although it's not detailed within this report because this takes us up till the end of March 25, I thought it would be of interest for the group to know that we've now increased the hours of that post to 26 hours. So we've got a health and safety advisor now working 26 hours within that post. Next point really is in relation to the HSE visit. So it's rare for Rushcliffe to have any visits from HSE, and they visited as a targeted visit really in response to a notification that one of our employees had been diagnosed with vibration white finger. This was detected through our occupational health surveillance that we do with our staff. Point to note is though that I believe that the exposure to vibration was from a previous employer, but we still had the duty to report that.
I'm really struggling to hear.
Sorry.
Really struggling. Yeah. Yeah.
Sorry, I shall.
I'm sorry.
That's. Sorry. Do you want me to start again? Would that be helpful?
The HSE, I'm very interested.
That's absolutely fine. I shall speak up and get clearer. Sorry about that. So HSE visit was following so it was a targeted visit because we had notified them of an employee that had been diagnosed with hand-arm vibration, so vibration white finger. So we have a responsibility to report that. It was picked up through our annual health surveillance that we do with our employees. The employee did say that their exposure to vibration was through a previous employer that they'd been employed with for quite a number of years before coming to us. So although that was put all under RIDDLE form, HSE wanted to come in and still have a look at our procedures. So the inspector visited on the 30th of January 2025. They did a full audit. So that included looking at our policies, procedures, risk assessments, the equipment that we've got, the monitoring that they do, and the training of our staff who use vibrating equipment. So it's really just to advise you that no material breaches were found by HSE during that visit. There were some recommendations that were minor recommendations that have been addressed, and that was just updating the policy a little bit. But really, the HSE were pleased with the information that they got on the day. HSE are now required to carry out a full inspection on site when they've completed a visit in relation to RIDDORs. So if we've done a RIDDOR reportable, they then are expected to come back another day to do a full site inspection. So they carried that out at the Streetwise Bingham Depot in February. And again, no material breaches were noted as a part of that visit. So I'll go on then to discuss some of the key activities that have taken place throughout the year. So we've continued to review health and safety policies. I've listed under 5.1 some of the policies that are due for review this coming year, this current year. And also we've got 2 new health and safety policies that we want to write this year, and that's around the new Terrorism Act, and also to have a policy in place to encompass all the work that we're doing around body-worn cameras, CCTV and recording devices that we have in place for our staff. As a part of the day-to-day role, there's been a lot of activity around health and safety audits and visits, training, details of which you can be found on table in the table on page 18, so I won't go into any further details on that. We've also completed the meetings of health and safety groups listed in 5.9. We've supported staff through use of occupational health, which is detailed in the table in 5.12. The health and safety advisors also been involved in workplace health initiatives, some of which are listed in 5.14. In relation to progress towards achieving the health and safety goals that were set at the meeting last year, we've met all of those with the exception of the review of the policies that were over 3 years old. There's still some outstanding ones which were listed previously, so that's been partially met, and those policies have been rolled into this year. And also the health and safety advisor has partially completed the training audit, which sits alongside the risk assessment. So they've completed some of the audit at some of the high risk areas and moving into some of the other areas. On health and safety performance, the number of accidents to employees and agency and staff has decreased slightly. So we've had 27 accident forms completed within the year. Table 7.4 shows the accident reports by type. Points to note is that both slip, trips and falls and manual handling incidents have decreased this year. The number of employee days lost due to accidents was 134 days within the 12-month period. As you'll see from the table in 7.6, that this figure fluctuates significantly from one year to next. In the table in 7.8, you'll see that the number of days off resulted from 8 accidents at work, 3 of those accidents accounting for much of the absence. RIDDOR reporting, we reported 3 accidents under RIDDOR due to there being over 7 days off because of that accident, and then there was the 1 notification for the hand-on vibration, as I've already spoken about. Then finally, it's just to list in 9.3 the objectives that have been determined for the forthcoming years, just to ensure that we continue to develop in health and safety and best practice across the council. I'm obviously happy to answer any questions that you may have in relation to the report.
Thank you very much. Open it to the floor for councillors to ask any questions, any observations, anything? Yeah, Councillor Sims.
Yeah, we mentioned the hand-on vibration RIDDOR report. Do we do pre-start checks for manual workers working with these equipments? Do we do occupational health checks on people? How do we establish that it was caused at a previous employer?
Okay, so we do a pre-employment questionnaire. So as a part of any recruitment into Rushcliffe, we do ask that employee, the prospective employee, to complete the questionnaire, which goes to occupational health. That requires them to declare if they've had any pre-existing conditions or any health concerns that we need to be aware of. This hadn't been diagnosed previously with this employee. We would normally, best practice is to do a hand-on vibration questionnaire when somebody starts within the organisation. I think this person had been in place for a few months before that questionnaire was completed. As a part of the recommendations from HSE, was to be more robust on that, which we've taken on board, and we are doing that moving forwards. It's always difficult to know where diseases have come from, especially relating to things like hand-on vibration, because it builds up over a number of years. HSE were clear that they were happy with the amount of exposure and the tools that our employee is using, and that it would have been highly unlikely that it was due to work at Rushcliffe. And the employee themselves, when they completed the form for the first time whilst working for us, did stipulate that those symptoms that they were experiencing were symptoms that they'd got prior to work with Rushcliffe. They didn't declare any of that on the pre-employment questionnaire, but it just came up on the annual HABS questionnaire that we've done.
Yeah, I'm a bit surprised with an organisation as big as Rushcliffe that we have just 26-hour advisor, a competent advisor that's required by law. The HSE haven't picked that up for whatever reason, but I can't see how we can be proactive in, and this clearly is a concern to me, the superficial nature of our forms that we're filling in for health and safety. I don't want to pry too much into the individual case. I assume they're an older individual that's worked in the manual trade for a lot of years, but I am surprised that we've only just put it up to 26 hours a week, and I would expect an organisation like ours to have at least a full-time person if they were committed to health and safety in its real form, because this organisation is too big, in my professional opinion, to warrant just a part-time health and safety advisor that's required in law. I'll end it there.
Oh, good. I don't know what I've done there. It's causing problems, right? And you can hear me now anyway. I don't know what I pressed. My question is just an inquiry, really, linked to table 7.8 and the table before it, 7.6, just where there's been a clear spike in the last couple of years of injuries and days off. And you mentioned that Riddle had visited Streetwise recently. Most of those days, 100 of them seem to be at R2Go. That's east, isn't it? And I'm just wondering, are they due a visit, you know, or is there a link between the fact that one's in house and one's not, or is it do we need to be concerned that there's such a large number of days off? Because obviously one major incident or some accident that's took 8 to 7 days. But I haven't seen the data for the year before. It just tells you a number. I'm just wondering if there is any concerns there about, you know, coming out of that data.
Stops you asking any more questions, doesn't it? So in relation to that, we have a difficulty in manual workforce with respect to if somebody has an accident at work, it's very difficult to get them back into their current role sometimes, and with the nature of the people that we employ within the manual workforce, we can't always find them a suitable alternative to get them back into work as well. So that's kind of one area that we struggle with. We do use occupational health to support on long-term sick cases, so we do try and get that person the best medical advice that we can to enable to support that return into work. So with respect to the fluctuation in numbers of accidents, I'm kind of comfortable with the fact that the number of accidents that we have are low. You'll find then that we have those peaks and troughs on number of days off due to, as within this one, there's literally one individual that's had significant amount of time off that's resulted in that big spike. I can't go into the details of that individual. It wasn't a serious accident. They still remain off work. We're working really hard with occupational health to get them back to work. It started as a physical injury, minor physical injury, which has resulted in more of a mental well-being as a result of that. So, I mean, I can only say that from my point of view, number of days off as a result of accidents is relatively low in comparison to other local authorities. We do benchmark against other local authorities. And yeah, we try our hardest to support and get people back into the workplace.
Councillor Plant, next.
Thank you. Yes, I mean, as you actually noted at the beginning of the meeting, the actual fire evacuation officer was 18.5 hours last year. So I'm just wondering why. I mean, I agree with Councillor Sims that, you know, it perhaps not enough hours at 26, but as I say, it was 18.5 last year. So I'm wondering what prompted the increase in the hours there. Sorry, I've got a few more, so shall I just carry on? And the other one was, I mean, I'm born myself here. I mentioned this last year that in terms of, obviously, we're not employees as councillors. Never in all the time I've been at Rushcliffe have we ever had a fire evacuation practice. And in terms of any meetings we've had, no one's ever said, well, if something happens, you go out that door and you meet in the car park or you meet down there. As I say, I did say it last year and nothing has happened in that time. So that's just repeating myself. And then there was the health champions that are mentioned in the report, and I just wondered what support they had really for that role. I'm presuming it's volunteers and whatever, and what training. And then what was my last one? I've forgotten it myself. Oh yes, I wondered in terms of employees, do they have any concessions at the gym? Thank you. That's me done.
Thank you. I'll take those one at a time. So health and safety, how we've delivered health and safety within the council has changed throughout the years. So although I'm the strategic HR manager, I've been at Rushcliffe for 25 years now, and for 20 of those years I've been the health and safety advisor for the council. It's only when I got a change and a promotion to be the HR manager that we looked at health and safety provision and how we were going to do that within the council. And at that point in time, we've looked at a number of different options. So we had me carrying on. So I increased my hours. So I was 18.5 hours as the health and safety advisor. I increased to full time doing the HR and the health and safety. The HR side of things kind of got busy, so then we were looking at how we sort of fill that gap. We did a year where Bolsover District Council were happy to provide some health and safety advice for us, so we had a bit of a hybrid model where we'd got myself internally and then Bolsover. We felt that Bolsover didn't have enough of a grasp for Rushcliffe and the day-to-day, so we decided to then recruit into the 18.5 hours as a permanent. So we've got the 18.5, so we had the 18.5 hours as permanent, and then me as a bit of a backup, so that I was available when they weren't working. But predominantly a majority of it was done by that 18.5 hours. When that person left, it gave us an opportunity for us to reflect on the amount of work that we've got, and the fact that with Streetwise coming back in house as well, it would be worthwhile to look at increasing those hours. We've increased it to 26 hours based on the fact that we've also recently got a new post within Streetwise, which is probably our highest risk activity within the council. Although R2Go is high risk, they do the same thing in and out every day, whereas within Streetwise they're using a multitude of equipment, so there's a lot of varying risks that they're exposed to. So we've recently recruited as well a person within Streetwise who's got health and safety qualifications, and they've got a bit of a split role, but I've met with her today. So we've got now a new health and safety advisor in post for 26 hours. We've met with the new person at Streetwise this morning just to talk about her role. So she's getting heavily involved in the Streetwise health and safety and just doing a little bit of other parts of the job as well. And on top of that, we do train our managers. So we've got managers who are trained in IOSH managing safely. So they've got skills and experience in things like risk assessment, accident investigation, all of those. So it's kind of a bigger package. So that's the answer to the first one. Yeah, point taken around the fire evacuation. I was under the impression that at the beginning of year that each scrutiny group would be given an overview again of fire evacuation, but we'll definitely pick that up again. Health champions, so as you rightly are volunteers, so they are any employee within the workplace has the opportunity to become a health champion. I think we've probably got 8 or 10 health champions across the council. They have some level of training in certain areas. So some of them have been on things like smoking cessation, one-day courses. But generally, the idea of the health champions is to get together to look at a plan of areas that we think that staff might be interested in learning about or trying to raise awareness alongside sort of national campaigns. So we'll always do stop smoking, we'll always do something on a cancer related illness and try and raise the profile of that. And we have exciting things like bake-offs and things just to try and get people involved and getting people talking. So we'll do things like coffee mornings for Macmillan and raise money, and we'll also do things about getting people talking, and we've got mental health first aiders as well that are trained. So it's just an additional kind of layer of staff who are interested in health, who want to kind of get involved in. So we only meet on a quarterly basis, and then we all kind of divvy out some of the work, and just some of it's just writing articles, some of it's having something over lunchtime sessions for staff for information, and sometimes we get external people in with their expertise to do things like blood pressure monitoring and things like that. So there's a whole range of things. And concessions, yes, half price concessions at our leisure centres.
Can I just come back on the terms of the bits and different bobs of the health and safety, sort of who has the actual oversight of the whole? I think
yeah, so the health and safety advisor, who's 26-hour post, so they're new into the role, they will primarily be our classed as our professional responsible person for providing the advice. Because I've got that qualification and experience and I manage that person, I'll be available to support and guide that role and step in if needed. But the delivery of health and safety sits within that post. The new post that we've got within Streetwise is to bolster and make sure that the risk assessments, the training and things are as good as they can be down there. So it's kind of just an additional resource to support that high risk area. So it'll be the the health and safety advisor 26-hour post who leads and ensures across the board that we're compliant on health and safety.
Thank you very much. We've got any other questions? Anything else? No. Questions that I had noted down have been asked anyway as well, so I won't repeat mine. So I'll move to the recommendations that we've got, which I do note that, as you'll see on the agenda, we do have just A to D, but we can look at including a E as well, partly from the questions and requests that Councillor Simmons and Councillor Plant have asked. So just going through the recommendations that we've got, and I'll cover kind of recommendation E, is that corporate overview considers detailed information contained within the annual health and safety report. B notes that the new permanent health and safety advisor has been appointed. C notes the significant progress made against the health and safety goals and objectives previously agreed by corporate overview group for the financial year 2024-25, and endorses the proposed health and safety objectives for 2025-26 as set out in the report. So if we can just have a show of hands from councillors if we agree with those, please, with A to D. Any against or abstentions?
Abstain.
Okay.
I wasn't here, so I didn't set the agenda for health and safety, so I don't know what you're having it against.
No, that's fair enough. That's fine. And if I can ask Shark just to read out what we've wrote down as a 2E recommendation to see if councillors are happy with this, because I kind of get that there's like a strong feeling around the post, and looking at that kind of capacity of the health and safety advisor.
So I've just very quickly drafted for consideration. The corporate overview group asks the head of paid service, the chief executive, to consider increasing the hours of the new health and safety advisor following concerns raised by councillors having reflected on the annual health and safety report.
It's very difficult for me to comment, being this is the first meeting that I've been to. But until I know how the organisation delivers health and safety, because we mentioned management training, IASH managing safely, which is a very basic course. I don't know what qualifications our HR managers got. So who was managing health and safety? Are they competent? Is deemed in law, but I would have thought the HC would have picked that up if they're not. The health and safety advisor, I don't know what qualifications they've got. Are they deemed in law? How we arrange health and safety, how is it done in practice rather than in paper? Who does what, where and when, which is required by law under your policy. So your arrangement. So I personally believe, having listened to the snippet tonight, alarm bells are going off in my head. In the unlikely event we had a major accident in this organisation, I'm not so sure that we're robust enough to defend it if we have a major injury. I'm not talking about a F2508A, which is a RIDDOR reportable and for occupational disease, which is a vibration issue. But I would like to see the organisation commit to actually getting a professional body to audit the organisation's health and safety arrangements to see where we're lacking, and then put in place from that audit report what we need to do to comply. This is Rushcliffe Borough Council. We do it right. You know, we don't play piecemeal. We don't do superficial. You know, this is not how I understand we do it. So what I would like to see is it's not just arbitrary increase hours. What do they actually do? What do the managers do? Because it's the manager's job to carry out risk assessment. It's an advisor's job to assist them. Yeah. And so it has to be a person that's competent to be able to do that risk assessment. So they need to be able to do the job to do that risk assessment. So what I'm actually saying is we need to have an actual look at health and safety. We've already had the HSE come in. They've said, no, that's fine. But now we're on their agenda. They'll be coming having another look. And if they do find a material breach, it tends to cost a lot of money when the HSE come in. So I would think being proactive by getting a professional body, not a body that an audit normal internal external auditors, a professional body in of competent people to audit our health and safety arrangements and then put forward recommendations that then can be taken by councillors as this is where we're at, this is where we want to be, and where does the organisation want to be. Councillors need to set that as well in conjunction with the chief executive and senior officers. Okay.
So they'll put a recommendation for a auditor, as you described, as an external organisation who's competent in a HSE to come in and audit the organisation on our practices, policies, and how we deliver HSE.
It's not just the paperwork; it's the doing the do.
Yeah.
Yeah, but it's not down to me. I'm just a councillor sitting on the group. You know, if other councillors believe that is correct, then please speak up. If other councillors believe it's a waste of money, this is democracy. I'm just putting forward what I think.
Is it worthwhile if I just give my opinion? So I'm a chartered member of IOSH, so I've got my NEBOSH diploma. I've had that for over 20 years. The new health and safety advisor is also NEBOSH qualified. Thought you might ask that. I'm pretty sure his diploma. I'm chartered member, yeah. So having been with the council for 25 years, we have had little interaction with HSE. They've never shown an interest in coming to see us because we do very little RIDDOR reporting. When they have been to see us, they've not picked up on any material breaches that they have then warranted to come back for. So I can never say in future, you know, you don't know what's around the next corner, do you, with respect to an accident. I feel, as always, there's always room for improvement. There's always things that we're trying to do and develop, and that goes along all the things that we've done over the years with respect to training of managers. As you say, we do have internal audit, so BDO, is it BDO? So we're due again for an audit in Q4 on health and safety, but I recognise the fact that, as you say, it's having somebody who's got a real in-depth knowledge of health and safety to do that. We do sit on a NOTS, Nottinghamshire-wide health and safety advisors work together, so we meet quarterly and we benchmark against each other. I attended those previously, and the health and safety advisor now attends those. And my feeling is that we are comparable to other local authorities with respect to that. I appreciate that having more hours in post might bolster that. But yeah, it's something that, yeah, as you say, it might be something that you want to consider, whether you think that's value for money moving forward based on previous issues that we've had. So
yeah, please don't think I'm being awkward. All I'm trying to be is understand where we're at, and understand it's self-regulation or legislation, health and safety. It's Napoleonic. You have to prove yourself innocent. That's through your robust systems, processes and systems. The basic questions I've asked tonight about health surveillance, I would think anybody going into a job where they're working on tools, in forestry, we do parks, which is park forestry. It's the highest, other than fisheries and forestry is the highest death rate. So yes, bins are quite highly rated, but also our parks are quite high when it comes to accidents and severe injuries because of the equipment they're using. But the basic question I asked is what health surveillance? We don't really do it. And all of a sudden alarm bells come up saying, wow, we fill a form in. So we don't know where we're at. We don't know where somebody's coming in, their health when they come in. So how do we defend any civil claims against the authority? Because we're the sitting ducks, the authority is the sitting ducks. The other person's previous employer might not be.
Just by sitting on the outside, obviously I don't do Joe's job. Joe's turned around tonight and said, we've got a new person come in. We're hoping they're enthusiastic. They're coming through. They've got qualifications. We've upped the hours. So we've had very little concern in the past. So if you're looking at this from a risk management point of view, we're mitigating the risks. We've not got a history of risks. I'm tempted to suggest that actually we wait and see what happens when Joe sits here in 12 months' time, because this is a report that comes annually, and say, right, what is the effect of having upped the hours? Are we still concerned? And at that point, yes, we'd like to do something about it, because if we are managing the situation and we're giving it extra resources, then you would be looking at something and saying, if we do pay to have HSE or whoever it might be come in, it might not be actually resolving a problem because there isn't a problem to resolve.
Would it then be kind of advisable for next year's report to kind of have something in there on how the aspects described from Councillor Sims of how we deliver HSE, who does what within the organisation? Because I didn't appreciate that there was somebody potentially within Streetwise. I kind of thought it was either this person in post or yourself that would go into Streetwise and look at their ways of working and how. I didn't appreciate that they had some kind of somebody within actual Streetwise doing it. But again, we're kind of, this is like the second report with Streetwise being in a house where we can see that there's that spike in the number of incidents, that potentially we just have something of how we deliver around the organisation, people that are trained, that kind of thing, what the training is that they have, and just explain it a bit more on what we do, and then see where we are in 12 months. As you say, this person's only recently come into the post, and kind of scrutinise then how it's been doing in 12 months.
Thank you. A year is a long time, and I wonder if there's any benefit in having an interim review partway through the year when the person's been in post for 6 months or so. Would that be helpful? Because a lot can happen in a year.
A lot can happen, but it isn't happening. If we were reporting this evening that there'd been a breach or a serious accident, or we felt that we had not managed the situation in the way that we perhaps ought to have done, then I would totally understand your concerns. But we've got an officer sitting here with a lot of experience, a lot of qualifications, saying, I'm not concerned. This is everything that we're doing, and we're keeping an eye on it. And we've increased our health and safety resources to make sure that the more risky services that we've just taken back in-house are being dealt with appropriately. What I'm asking for is for you to give them a bit of time to get their feet under the table, to get some work done, and to come back in a year and for you to assess the situation then.
It's not the health and safety advisor that does health and safety, but what I would be expecting to see is, right, this is how many in Streetwise risk assessments we're going to carry out this year. And I'd expect to see, this is how many we've done, this is what we found. Right, because risk assessment it's a tool to identify risk. Yeah, this is how many we're going to be doing parks. This is how many we're going to be doing in the corporate services. This is how much training. This is our training needs analysis. We think that these people need this level of training in X. These people need this level of training in Y to competently do their job. And then I'd like to see, have we achieved those targets? Then we're starting to get into good governance, good corporate governance. At the moment, I'm really concerned that this is finger in the wind and hoping for the best. You wouldn't believe how many people I've sat in front of and said, it's never happened to me before. You know, so a lot of people, you know, and the trouble is the public sector get dragged into this. It's not going to happen to us, but it does, you know. And I'm sitting here as a councillor saying I want us to be an exemplar of good practice, not a tick boxing council, you know, a council that ticks boxes. You know, we have environmental health working with us. We actually enforce as an authority health and safety, some parts of health for the lower risk, for things like, you know, your offices and shops and warehousing, which is quite high risk. We actually enforce. So we should be an exemplar of good practice because we enforce the law. And that's all I'm trying to say. At the moment, I'm just really uncomfortable with the smoke, what I see as smoke and mirrors. And I'd just like to see black and white. This is what we've done. This is what we've identified. This is what we benchmarked against. And I'm not getting that in the corporate overview group. And now I'm chairing, obviously, corporate governance. I'm going to be voicing that in there as well, because we it's not a race to the bottom, and it's not about ticking a box and hoping for the best. It's about being proactive and saying, being confident when the enforcers come in, that we can be robust enough to back that back and have no material breaches, which we haven't got. Yeah, I keep saying it. I know we haven't got any material breaches, but I'd like to understand where they are potentially and be informed of that and put something in place as a council. But I've said enough now.
Can I just come back very final moments, really? I mean, it's disappointing to hear that you feel that the smoke and daggers around the report, based on the fact that we've had one reportable of hand-arm vibration, which everybody who's dealt with that case has agreed that it's not related to Rushcliffe's exposure to that employee. We failed to pick it up as soon as they started, but once we had done the occupational health questionnaire that we do annually with staff, it has been picked up. We've followed process. It's been RIDDOR reported. That employees now got the support that they need to continue in their job. We're doing all the hand-on vibration assessments that we need to do, so we know where the exposure risks are. I suppose you being new, and you're probably not grasping everything that's within the report, and I suppose if that's a failure of ours not providing all of that information, but we do have a lot of training that goes on for staff. We do have competent managers. We do have risk assessments in place. So for you to say that you'd like to see how many risk assessments that we're going to be doing in the year, we've got risk assessments in place. We're reviewing them. When we've got a new piece of work that we're doing, we're developing a new risk assessment, example being that the rollout of the new Simpler Recycling bins, they've been working on the risk assessments for that over the last couple of months to make sure that the rollout is going to be safe for our staff to do. So I think it would be difficult for us to write a report to you to say next year we propose to do X amount of risk assessments, because those risk assessments are in place. They are being reviewed. We have all the policies in place. I've explained to you in the report that we've identified 2 areas where we are looking at new policies, because it's new legislation and new practices that we've got in place with respect to body worn cameras that we've identified we don't have a policy in place. So yeah, I suppose you want more reassurance. It's how we can give you that reassurance. So I'm happy to work with you on getting to that point that you feel satisfied. I suppose it's for the group to decide how best for that to happen. So that's me.
I think there comes a point at which we have to say we've appointed people to do this job and they've been doing it for a number of years and they have qualifications and we're happy with those qualifications. And as Charlotte said, we haven't had an incident which needs to be investigated. And therefore, I think we have to trust the people we have appointed, because otherwise we're going to be looking into absolutely everything that we appoint officers to do. and unless there is an issue, there is no need to do that. So I think there comes a point at which we have to say, yes, we're satisfied, we're happy, we've been updated on what's new, and anything that needed reassessing, and therefore we have to say we are content.
So just to move forward then, we won't have, from what it is with the E, as I described earlier, but what we'll just look for in when it comes round to reviewing this report is just a bit more information on how we deliver HSE, and kind of what positions, who does what, and the kind of the structure on the delivery of HSE. And the practice, because it is a report on incidents and of what has happened, but it's just kind of I think it's the proactive, preventative kind of measures, and what we're doing on like risk assessments and that is just wanting to know a little bit more. So even if it's kind of like what has been looked at, like it's been mentioned with the new bin scheme, that kind of big thing that's happened, and what's happened around risk assessments. So just some kind of the next report in a year's time, I think it's just to consider. I shall move on the agenda. Thank you very much, Jack, for answering the questions and everything. I'll move on to item 5, the finance and performance management, and we've got presented by Katie and Charlotte. So as always on this one, it will be Katie first.
Good evening, everybody. As Councillor Williams has just said, we're going to present the financial and performance management for Q1. So I will go through the finance part of this, and then Charlotte will go through the performance part, and then we'll take questions at the end if that's okay with everybody. So just to apologise and just draw your attention to an error we've noticed in this. In the recommendations on the special expenses, we refer to 6.3. K, it should be 11.3. It is correct in the rest of the report. It's just wrong on the recommendations. And also in paragraph 4.4 and paragraph 4.13, the figure quoted of 0.456 million to top up the LGR reserve should be 0.377 million. So apologies for those errors. So just to give an overview then for Q1 for finance, we are reporting a net revenue efficiency of 0.637 million. The significant variances you can see in table 1. We're proposing to use that underspend to support additional cost pressures, which you can see in Appendix A, which is mainly the work we need to do for LGR and also simpler recycling. In terms of capital, we're currently got a projected underspend of 0.681 million. Notably, that's a reduction in expenditure on warm home grants, but that's because we won't get the funding also. So they were just indicative amounts given at the time of budget setting, but the actual funding isn't that amount. So we are only in Q1, so it is likely that the position may change throughout the year, and we will update you through further reports. So special expenses is projected to be 1.3k above budget, mainly due to issues we've had at Bridgeford Park. So we've been doing some security improvements. We have also incurred some cost for patrols due to antisocial behaviour, but we have managed to get some funding from the Police and Crime Commissioner to help towards that as well.
Obviously, we've still got financial pressures, and we've got the work through LGR that's coming. So obviously, lots of challenging times coming ahead. But we feel that the finances are in a relatively healthy position. And as I've said, we will keep you updated throughout the year. Charlotte, if you want to comment on performance.
Certainly. So just very briefly from me, the full scorecard for performance is in Appendix G. By way of summary, you'll remember at the last meeting, most of people were here, we had a more detailed report on the progress towards the delivery of the strategic tasks discussed at the last meeting, so I don't intend on spending very much time on those at the moment. This is the Q1 report, and we have 8 performance measures that have not met target this quarter, some of which we have discussed before, such as community facilities and Rushcliffe Oaks, both of which were subject to scrutiny last year. Waste and recycling, we still have a problem with fly tipping, which is being mirrored nationally. I know that we've had that conversation, and the lower rates of recycling. Obviously, we are hoping that our exciting new purple bins and kitchen caddies and various other things will raise that recycling rate we are anticipating to about 60% before the end of this year. Other than that, I'm happy, and I'm sure Katie will be too, to take any questions you might have.
Open it to the floor for councillors on any of those. Councillor Plump.
Yes, in terms of just Rushcliffe Oaks, is that put in place for that? And I am assuming that without a doubt things are improving there, because I mean a lot of it, every person I've spoken to who's actually attended the service there has said how wonderful it is. And to me, one of the issues was that word of mouth also was going to do an awful lot of, well, obviously improve the uptake. So it is definitely on the up, isn't it? We can say that.
Yeah, absolutely. We're not reporting any significant variances against what's been set at the budget for Rushcliffe Oaks. Obviously, we can't control the number of, the death rate or whatever, yeah. But as you say, we've had some good coverage, and yeah, things are looking very positive for the crematorium.
Just a few comments really, well, asking for information. There's been obviously a review of the assets for Rushcliffe. That's been ongoing, I think, through the years. So, and that says that's complete. So will that be coming to council at some point? Or no? I mean, presumably there's a point in reviewing all the assets that we have. We might be getting rid of some of them, I don't know.
There is an asset review group that have managed the task, and I think that the only time that anything would come forward to Cabinet or Council would be in terms of disposal or a significant investment in a new asset. But in terms of the reviewing of it, that sits with the asset management group.
Okay, and my last one was the DFG grant. In the report, it says that, I mean, a couple of years ago, the discretionary one was stopped. Now it seems to have been reinstated, but 80k has gone into it, but that 80k was taken from the mandatory one. So I'm just wondering what, or how, or why that.
Yeah, the team who manage that are specialists in that area, and we get different pots of funding. So that is within their gift to do that. So it's not taken away from anything. It just means we can do more work. So we've been able to put that money into there.
Not new money, it's taken from the mandatory grant. 80k has been taken from that and put into the discretionary. The discretionary is the top-up grant, isn't it?
We're still able to deliver all of the mandatory work, so there is money available to do other work, so that's why it's been put into the discretionary area.
Okay, thank
you. I've just got one question, and I'm just going to go to the area of the report that it's got it, where The antisocial behaviour issues at West Park, and the 11.3k, where it was about security improvements, and to Bridgeford Park and that. It also mentions about that there was a cost incur due to patrols. Who did those patrols around? Because it's and we've had an offset in funding from the PCC.
I don't know who the actual company is that supply that. I'd have to find out. Do you know? Yeah.
But they're done by a private company called Magpie.
So is that we employed them to come in and do, because of the level, as kind of like security on those, as you would in a nightclub type situation on the parks?
Mhm.
Okay, thank you.
Just a clarification, just wondering, 4.20. 4.20, the first bullet point says provide community leadership in the redevelopment of the Rathbone site during and post decommissioning of the power station. It says 50% progress. Just wondering what that means, because are we 50% through our allotted role that we have, or is it 50% towards something being achieved there, or what do we mean by 50%? If that makes sense.
It
Doesn't seem
does,
like what-
yes. So with all of these strategic tasks, what we sit down and do, or we encourage officers to do at the very beginning of the corporate strategy, is plot out how they think that work will span out, what kind of timescale it might be, and whether there are any kind of milestones and deliverables. So that 50% applies to the length of the corporate strategy. So we look at a 4-year period, and they think that they are 50% through the work they envisaged doing with the team over at Ratcliffe at the beginning of that process.
Follow up on that. So again, I mean, will some report be coming to councillors in terms of what is actually happening on that site shortly at some point?
I don't know the answer to that question, but I can find out for you.
So any other questions or comments? Anything on this report? Yeah, Councillor Threat.
Just a quick one about training. I note that there are no training delivered this year, this quarter from May to now. So are there any plans to deliver further training in person for councillors?
There is a training plan for the rest of the year. Yes, we tend not to deliver any training in the first quarter because hopefully you've all had nice summer holidays and things like that. So it's not an unusual position to be in.
Right, as always with the reports, go through the recommendations now. So it is recommended that corporate overview scrutinises the projected revenue budget efficiency for the year of 0.637 million and proposals to earmark this cost pressures given in Appendix A and paragraph 4.1. The projected capital budget efficiencies of £0.681 million included in budget changes in Appendix D, and projected overspend on special expenses of 11.3k. I remember that right from the beginning, in paragraph 4.7, and D, performance exception to judge whether further information is required. I think we've all met those requirements and what's been asked of us for this report. Can I have a show of hands, please? Thank you very much. Going on to item 6, feedback from scrutiny group chairman. And I take everybody's had their first meetings of the cycle. So I shall go round where I'm sat in a clockwise direction. So I'll start with Councillor Cumberland, if you've got anything to feedback.
We had a meeting back in July, I think it was, and we had a visitor from East Midlands Freeport to talk about the progress of the development at the Freeport. I have to say we were somewhat underwhelmed. it was a very nice, as I put it, glossy brochure, but there didn't seem to be a great deal of progress or action. And that is what we were looking for. We felt there was nobody steering the ship, so to speak. Therefore, we asked if we could have a report back on a timeline for developments and modelling of Junction 24, which will be impacted by the development, to be provided, and an update to be provided to all councillors. We also requested that this came back to us for further scrutiny, because really what we received was very shallow report, I'm sad to say. And that's, oh.
Yes. When you say shallow, do you mean that not a lot seemed to be happening?
No, by shallow, I mean, it was underwhelming. There didn't seem to be any movement, any direction. And that's what we were looking for, something a bit stronger with a bit of direction, saying this is where we're going, this is what we intend to do, and we're going to do it in this time. Well, we didn't have any of that. Like I say, it was like a glossy estate agent's report.
Thank you very much. Councillor Breck, do you have anything to?
Yes. We had MTVH who had come to the community scrutiny group in July. It was a very long meeting, and because the MTVH had come to us after almost 7 years, this topic was scrutinized after almost 7 years. And at the end of the meeting, although they had endeavoured to answer all the concerns and the questions that the councillors had raised, it arm of the view that we didn't feel reassured, and there was a recommendation made for myself to raise a further scrutiny request at this meeting today for MTVH to provide the group with a further update in terms of their performance in 12 months' time. Now, what I wasn't sure is whether I need to do that in writing, or I'm just raising this here today, that are we okay for them to come back in 12 months' time? Yeah.
First of all, if you have a look at terms of reference to your group, it says that you can't scrutinise the same item within a 2-year period. So if you've had scrutiny now, if you brought a scrutiny request now, we would be saying you need to give them time to action anything that you've heard back on before we come forward. So we tend not to approve scrutiny requests within a 2-year period. So that would be my first bit of advice. Secondly, you need to be very specific in that scrutiny request, which you write does need to be written. It needs to be considered so that we can all have a look at it beforehand. It needs to specify what it is that you're concerned about and what action you're hoping to gain from that. Scrutiny has always got to be about how we can effect change. So it has to be things within the council's remit to change. We can't force Metropolitan Housing to change something that's within their own their processes, their policies, or whatever. And that's was the difficulty when you're scrutinising another organisation, is how much influence have you got to persuade them to change what they're doing?
There were a lot of questions where they're not fully answered, and there were a lot of question marks also raised about the quality of repairs and how MTVH was alleviating those concerns. They did give reassurances that they will have a newsletter twice a year to inform councillors, but around the room there were so many other questions raised at that point. I mean, Councillor Williams was there at that point as well, and correct me if I'm wrong, we just felt that that 2 hours of scrutiny did not really answer all the issues that they'd raised, and we did not feel reassured. I'm happy to do a scrutiny request along with the councillor Plant, and we can put that in writing, but at the end of that meeting, that was the majority view.
I'll just come in. I think again it was probably 2017 when Metropolitan last came, and of course it was under the different system. It was a very long time, and to be fair, I might be right. They were they were very on the defensive, weren't they?
Yes.
For want of a better word, in terms of their responses, because simply there had been so many complaints from residents and such a poor response from them.
I think, as you say, is to look at a request shot and I think go away from this meeting to see how we can kind of bring that forward to this and how it would look potentially in the future meeting. A review of that, because it was, as Councillor Perec said, there was a lot of strong feeling just from those councillors in the room, but also from other councillors reporting within groups and that on kind of issues and responses that they've had from the organisation, but just how we interact with them and kind of the processes that they have, and then also the processes as well that we have as councillors with them in order to report and for our residents. So I think it's something, if we can have a look at how it could come back in some kind of form to councillors as a either is a request or a review, kind of something other in the future. I don't.
If I can just say, I'm going back some time historically. We used to have Metropolitan come and report to us. I think it was annually.
They weren't the only ones. We used to have a lot of partners come and report, a standard report every year. And for those of us who have sat through all of those meetings, it was very complacent. Councillors just sat around listening to the same, we're doing a great job and aren't we wonderful? And when we did the last scrutiny review, it's like, this is not achieving anything. It's wasting everybody's time. This is not what scrutiny should be about, because it was just annually coming in and telling us how great they were. What we actually need to be looking at is where is there an actual problem that is affecting residents' lives that we can do something about. Then we get people together and say, what is the problem? What's the nature of it? How does it exist? Have you tried this? Have you tried that? How do we resolve it? That's what scrutiny needs to be about. And it isn't achieved by having the same people and the same report come back year after year. It may well fill your agendas, and I hope that makes you happy, but it doesn't achieve anything.
So I think that's where we can go away after this meeting and have a more in-depth discussion rather than necessarily right this minute, and to see what from that meeting, review that meeting and on what the specific issues that came out and were raised by councillors, and to kind of go, where can we explore on our interaction as an organisation with Metropolitan Homes and how we can take that forward.
I hear what you say, Charlotte, about organizations previously coming in annually and giving the reports and how great they were. But in this instance, they aren't doing great. They're absolutely appalling, to say the least. So I agree, we don't need organizations coming in year after year if they're doing great. And the request for a scrutiny is not, we're not saying that we want MTVH to come annually. That's not what we recommend. This is just because they've come after so many years. They were very much on the defense. There were lots of issues to scrutinize, and we weren't reassured. What was suggested is we have them come back in a year's time, and if they've answered all those questions and they've reassured councillors, then we'll go back to not having them back in a year's time.
Two things. Can I also say that back in those days, sounds like I've got one foot in the grave, the portfolio holder, I believe, used to visit Metropolitan. Instead of them coming to us, it was Councillor Mason at the time. She used to go and visit them. So if there were concerns, she could take those with her. But what I want to say is, yes, I appreciate unless there's unless we've voiced a problem, we are reactive. And it really rather goes to what Councillor Sims was saying. In some ways, we need to also be proactive. So we need to be looking at things so that we don't get the problems. Not that we look at something because we've got the problem. I'll leave that with you.
I've just been saying, talking to colleague next to me, and I'm saying, what are we trying to achieve? What are we trying to achieve? What is scrutiny? Because this isn't scrutiny. We're not stress testing the organisation. This, I don't know what I'm doing here, if I'm perfectly honest. You know, I'm ticking a box. This isn't proper scrutiny. You know, it's the first time I've been on this group and this committee, or it was set up what, 4 or 5 years ago. Tina, was it? I think it was the first one. You were the first chair of it 4 or 5 years ago. This corporate over 6 years, and I'm just thinking, what are we doing that the normal scrutiny groups haven't done, and what are we achieving by it? If we're not willing to stress test our systems, then this is just a talking shop, you know. And when I do my my update on the first corporate governance, there'll be something more that gets highlighted when I do my little tell you what's been going on at corporate governance. So I really do think, and I know it's been said that we need to look at scrutiny again, and have we got any good ideas and stuff, but I think, have we got good ideas to improve what we've got, or do we need to start again? My personal opinion is we need to have a real think about what we're trying to achieve as an organisation. Really do. And is the governance structure working?
Well, I think it's best to have a chat in order to take this forward, bring it back to the next one, because you'll see from the next item there's a few potential items that could go in onto committees and that, but certainly in it for a year's time, then they can have something hopefully that can come back and that's agreeable in order to be scrutinised on metropolitan homes. And not just also potentially metropolitan homes, but all the providers. We have them in as the biggest one, but it was highlighted no information that they provided, but from the others as well, because it's likewise just from my ward. I have 3 different providers, and he was wanting to know more about them as well, because they take up quite large areas. So as I say, it's maybe to go on and look at it. To Jack.
Oh yeah, just follow on from what Councillor Sims was saying. Like, be interesting for those of us who are new to understand the powers that this group has. This particular group, do we, for instance, have the right? You're talking about maybe organising some councillors to get together, but I don't think there's a single councillor across the borough that doesn't have some resident who has issues with Metropolitan, for instance, on this particular issue. So, can we get a group together of councillors who cross-party, doesn't have to be a scrutiny thing, and to organise a group who can sit and look at this issue and be proactive, come up with some measures that we could do and see what powers we have over Metropolitan, because we gave well, I can't remember. We passed authority for our help to Metropolitan for a good or ill. But it'd be nice to know what powers we have at the county to hold them to account. It'd be nice to know what powers we have as an organisation to hold them to account, because obviously they have their own things that they have to scrutinise and look at themselves, and we don't have that power over them. But we have passed that power over to them by removing them from our portfolio, for instance. So it'd be good for us to get together as a group of councillors, cross-party, and see what we can do about this issue. And do we have the authority as this group to have that to be done? That's what I was trying to find out. But you probably missed half that, because it was in.
I think some of the items that you touched on there
Yeah.
is what communities did and
Yeah.
what they're then tasked and what the remit of community scrutiny is to do and what they did in that meeting. And scrutinising Metropolitan. As I say, it wasn't. Yes, Metropolitan came in and presented to and answered questions because of being the biggest housing provider to the borough, but there is many others.
I suppose if you
That
don't
also, and it's kind of, there was a lot of kind of items where there was a lot of themes that came out of what other providers are doing and other information of what the other providers do to kind of not then comparing them to Metropolitan, but to know what they do, because yes, there is, but like I say, I've got on the ward that I cover at least three different providers that have to deal with, and one of them has a kind of a huge and a very large area and an estate that's been taken on. So it's kind of knowing how they operate the same way as Metropolitan, because again, they all operate differently, and how we can go and interact, how we can represent residents, and when residents come to us with issues, how we then go to them and to deal with. But there was a lot of issues that were raised in that meeting that councillors felt they wanted to bring back and to kind of get Metropolitan back into review going in the year's time.
Right, because that was the follow-up. I think some of the frustration comes that the scrutiny occurs, Metropolitan or whoever it is turns up to do their little presentation, and then we can't bring it back. That's what you see, like with a 2-year window now, so we can bring it back as a scrutiny item. So it just feels a bit, that's where it starts to get frustrating, because it feels like that's not actually anything happening, is it? It's just they've come and defended themselves, and then we're sat there for 2 more years unable to do anything. So I'm just wondering, as an overview group, do we have the power then to go, let's get a council group together and organise how we can proactively change this? Because so that's what I'm just wondering, what we have as a power, because it does feel like you're just stuck in this endless cycle of not actually achieving much. And it's not an offence, I'm not attacking the scrutiny system as such or the people involved in the scrutiny. It just seems like that's where we're at. And this organisation, particularly Metropolitan, seems to be getting away with things because we're unable to scrutinise it properly. From our perspective, they might be completely brilliant.
Well, the sticking point that you've described of the 2-year kind of thing is in the terms of reference. And if would do terms of reference scrutiny get kind of approved annually, do they?
Yes, as in the constitution will go to governance scrutiny group once a year to be approved. So therefore, if we wanted to amend the terms of reference, that would be the method by which we would do it.
And then you could change it to a year or whatever kind of timeline, and then potentially items then would be able to come back. I think it's a lot of that was because of it being so far, and with some of the items, is to kind of, as Charlotte described, is to give that kind of 2 years for any kind of discussion, recommendations and that. But it's like we're now getting like this, where we want it to come back and how it can come back. And then you're going to have to try and find a specific area that was scrutinised last time that we're then wanting to scrutinise this time, which was picked up differently and the practices. So maybe that's the kind of thing for government to look at and kind of go, yeah, we'll look at changing the terms of reference, so to speak, for when things can come back into the scrutiny, because it's terms of reference.
I do think we need to look towards extenuating circumstances whereby, as Hepburn has said, they scrutinised Metropolitan but didn't cover everything that was requested within their scrutiny request. And therefore, what was left out, there should be provision for that to come back, because otherwise you've not completed the process.
But that's where we can then go and have a discussion on what that request looks like, because there's nothing here in front of us to then go, yes, we agree with with that to then go to scrutiny to
I don't
community,
think you need,
or we might like add in some areas as well, or kind of.
well, I don't see that we need to have another scrutiny request just to game the system. I think there should be a provision for that extenuating circumstance whereby we haven't completed the process. So it either rolls over to the next meeting or you set another date.
Well, certainly it wouldn't be, I wouldn't kind of go that it would go into the next community's scrutiny. So certainly we will have time to come back to the next corporate overview with a request and kind of what was not looked at by the community, by Metropolitan, and what was missing, to outline what that request is in order to get them back. Because also we can't then go and say, yes, we'd want it to come back, but we've also then got to put it on the programme of works and when that would be, and often that is then going to be dependable because they're external in order to get arranging what meeting in the future to look at of where they would come in. So that's where I understand the sentiment, and I totally agree with what is being said by all councillors and bringing this back in, and just then going with the practicalities of bringing it back in, because we haven't had it in. This is kind of the first that Charlotte has heard of this coming back to scrutiny, so she hasn't been able to go and speak to officers about when can we get them to come back in and get Metropolitan in, and also the other information that was kind of requested in that meeting for that to be collated. When's the kind of appropriate time, even if it is that it go potentially July 2026, which is the year corresponding meeting to when it was discussed.
I hear what you're saying, but the thing that I'm always conscious of is expenditure and officers' time. But if this process hasn't been completed, the report, there's still part of that report which has already been done, which hasn't been addressed. So there shouldn't be that extra officer time. It should already be in there.
Yeah, but in the meeting there was more information, how they work, statistics and stuff like that, and other information that wasn't provided in the officer report or the report from Metropolitan Housing that was requested to be scrutinised, and that's kind of the things to come back. So there is kind of going to be the additional information, but it's where do we put it on and when can we get
but you're saying it would come back in a year's time. Well, that's within that 2-year window that we're told that we can't break.
No, at the moment, because that's what the terms of reference says, but that's where, as what's just been said, is that court governance can look at the constitution, thank you, and change that terms of reference, and that would then happen, but then it can come back within a year. But then also, if there was items, and as it's been felt that there is items that weren't scrutinised by the committee because they didn't have that information and it wasn't answered, then it can come back, and it's kind of going that on that request, this is how it's different, even though it's on the kind of the same ballpark
Those
subject.
are extenuating circumstances.
So that's
should come back within the 2-year window.
I'm gonna look very quick, and then I'm going to go on to Councillor Sims.
So
for his.
just for my clarity, there are two processes going on over here. The first process is for the terms of reference, which goes to the governance group, and Councillor Sims will have to review it in terms of basically looking and reviewing the terms of reference and adding the additional clause of extenuating circumstances or bringing an item back to scrutiny within a year's time. So that's one process. And the question I have about that is, how do we make that request to the governance group and to Councillor Sims to review that? And the second process that I understand is we still have to do a request in the meanwhile, a scrutiny request on paper for it to be looked by the corporate overview group at the next meeting, which is going to be in 3 months' time. And the other thing, in terms of Officer Darrell Birch was present that day when we were discussing about MTVH coming back in a year's time, and we weren't advised at that point that we can't come back in a year's time. We didn't know about this clause about not coming back up until 2 years. So I just want to understand these processes, because at the minute I'm not clear what I am doing as the chair and how will all this be scrutinized properly.
In the sense of trying to get through all of that as easily as possible so that we can all move on. So one, it's the monitoring officer's responsibility to review the constitution. That constitution comes forward to the governance group once a year to be approved and then goes to council. So that there's a very clear process there. So I will talk to the monitoring officer to flag this up as something that she may well want to adjust in reflection of this conversation. If it comes forward to governance group, I have no doubt whatsoever that the chair and vice chair will pick up on the fact that it hasn't been changed if that is the case. And then that's a conversation they can have in their meeting. As far as we go through, so we do have, I can think of one item that occurs regularly once a year, and it's the carbon management plan, which comes back every single year because it was decided when we first did it that as a major project for the council that it would keep coming back and it would keep coming back. Now, this is the first I have heard about your scrutiny meeting not meeting the objectives of the scrutiny request. It's not feedback that I've had from the lead officer, and it's not something that's been raised internally. So please give me the opportunity to go and have those conversations, and we will let you know what we can do about it.
Sure, thank you.
Councillor Sims.
Thank you. Yeah, obviously it's my first meeting that I've chaired. It came fairly quickly, Corporate Governance Committee. So we had a number of things on the agenda, and audit reports, internal, external. The annual governance statement, which really is just updated from the year before, and the year before, and the year before, and the year before. It was an interesting first meeting. We had some interesting discussions about how much money we spend on DEI, which we can't actually pin down as an authority, how much we actually spend on DEI, which is quite a hot topic at the moment. But one thing that it caught the auditor by surprise, from a previous committee that I was on, we were at the license. We were talking about licensing, and we had a presentation from the licensing enforcement officer, and they proudly said that they had found anomalies with the tax that was, or the charge for licensing of two major venues within Rushcliffe, and to the tune of about £19,000 a year over 19 years, which is a lot of money. And the auditors didn't know anything about it, which I was really, really surprised about. What are we paying auditors for if they're not really attuned to how much is that? £250,000 over the 19 years of money that the authorities neglected to collect in. And so they didn't know anything about it. I wanted to know what lessons we've learned from it, and it seems that lessons we've learned was nothing, because we didn't really investigate the root cause of the issue. So we don't know whether we've still got issues in other areas. It was purely by accident, because of the Take That concert, that it was picked up. So really, again, this is what I was talking about earlier, that yes, we all look bright and shiny, but under there are issues that when you lift the stone, it's sort of being put back down again. And I wasn't comfortable with that. A couple of the councillors were quite vociferous in trying to tie down, and it was really, if I'm honest, swept under the carpet. I I, as my first chair, didn't want to cause to be my normal self and cause a bit a bit of a rug. So I've agreed to sort of the auditors to sort of have a look at it and come back to us on it. But what we really need to do as this group is insist that we have a root cause analysis of what happened, why it happened, how much money did the authority lose or not gain, and how we're going to stop it happening again.
On that, I mean, if that's, why isn't that suggested at the meeting? Right, I don't
was.
think that's our, is that the role of us to be picking up on? Wouldn't it?
So
So
this is an overview group. This is the group that.
Well, I'd like to then hope that it then go back to governance and be reported back to governance. Wouldn't be.
I'm afraid it's the first I've heard of it. So again, I'm going to have to say I will come back to you on that one.
We'd be getting like the auditing and everything at the every meeting, so I hope you'd be able to then get an update on where they are with that process and coming back to governance.
Yeah.
Of the kind of the investigation and where it's how and why and what preventative measures are going to be put into play. So
I want this group to find that and tie it down so that it comes back to it.
It's something I'm going to need to go and have a word with Sarah Pete about before I can comment either way. But I suspect that what their response will be is we have a scrutiny request process. If you have a scrutiny request, the difficulty is that governance tends not to get allocated scrutiny requests from this group. So that's why I need to go and have a conversation with them to find out what's happening first.
Have we finished with that particular?
Yes, Tina, yeah.
Right, because I was going to leave this till we went to the work programme, the actual work programmes, the diary, because my group have nothing. And I did mention, and it seems that everybody else is mentioning these things now, so I'll mention it now, that we said at our last meeting we wanted the Freeport to come back to us. And I expected to see it on the diary sheet, and it's not there.
I had no idea.
So I thought, well, as everybody else is chiming in and saying I want mine to come back, I better emphasise it now rather than wait until the end of the meeting.
I think what we're going to have is kind of on the next item where it's got feedback from lead officers. I think the big thing is going to be for Charlotte is to kind of speak to everybody's lead officers to find out where these items are being asked in the meeting by chairs and by the councillors, that it kind of gets communicated to Charlotte for these to be investigated and to be looked at prior to then coming here. So like we've had with Metropolitan Housing, with was it or kind of payment kind of review, yeah, licensing, yeah,
Well,
and with
officers
is that then it's yeah, but they had still had the opportunity to go and feed back to Charlotte on what has been discussed in that meeting, and then what councils and what the outcomes were from that meeting in order to come back. So I think in this kind, we need to give Charlotte a bit of grace in order to go and find out a bit more, and to speak to the officers, potentially review those meetings and with what was discussed. Because again, some of these would like not necessarily would either be put onto the program. We could look to put them onto the program with a request, even if it's the same one or how it is the next. I would like to think that the item that's been raised in governance would go straight back to governance as part of the auditing and everything, and as part of future reports that around auditing that of how that's going to be prevented from happening again. So I think we just need to kind of give a bit of grip on it.
It seems to me that all three chairs have raised issues that Charlotte says she was unaware of, which makes me question what is the process after a scrutiny meeting to make sure that Charlotte gets this information. So she's getting it now from these reports. So should these reports not be made immediately after the scrutiny group and then sent to Charlotte? Because we're now several months, in our case, a couple of months down the line from our issues that we had at our group. And I'm not sure when the other two groups were. So now there's going to be an even more of a time lag while Charlotte goes to talk to the officers. Though this, to me, is a failure in the system, and it should be something that should be sorted out as quickly as possible.
I was just going to say the same thing. Sorry, but also not only should the report go straight from that meeting to yourself, I think then prior to this meeting there should be some action points if there have been anything that's happened for us to hear about, because otherwise you're just telling us stuff that you did 2 months ago and we're saying what we did 2 months ago, and we can't answer any questions you've got about what's happened since about those things. Right, you get the idea.
The point is that we have pre-meetings with the officer for the scrutiny meeting that we're having. And really what is needed after the meeting, and more work for officers I know, is another, I just say, we'll have a half hour on Zoom or whatever, Teams, whatever, just pick up, because obviously we have the meeting, don't we? And we all go and leave. So just a sort of a follow-up of, or a review, but pretty much the week after we've had the meeting as quickly as possible. Or there may be times when that's not needed, but is the, I mean, from the officer to the chair, do we need a quick half hour or whatever? Yes or no? But the time lapse is just too long.
I think that's going to be sort of how, as part of the process of delivering scrutiny, and it's not kind of having a route bit. I think it's just to see how the officers are, and if you're requesting that, is to then put forward to the officers that you kind of have a debrief type of thing from the meeting and go over action points from that kind of meeting. And if there is these items, because I think there's also then a presumption that the lead officer would take away from that the action points, and these kind of being kind of big action points of bringing stuff back to scrutiny, and to be looked at, and how they would come back to scrutiny, and for them to go, right, we've had this meeting, this is what the council has discussed, this is what they would like to come back, and they would kind of go shot and say, this is what's happened. That's what you kind of would presume would happen, but it just kind of think that there's been like a failing there. And it's been highlighted by every committee, because they've all got an item that they're wanting to be brought back. So I think it's shot to go speak to the officers on those kind of things, and how we can then take it and put measures in to prevent it from happening again, even if it is like either, if it's felt, depending on the meeting, a debrief or a debrief email kind of thing of what was kind of raised as action points, from that, that could be then sent to chairs and vice chairs on what was kind of discussed. And then if chairs and vice chairs see, well, actually, I thought we were going to bring that back, or this was going to happen, then you're not then waiting X amount of months to have the prior meeting on what is going to be discussed in it. And then you hear what the action points are, and that often action points are often kind of met the next day because the officers go away because it's fresh, find out the information, ask the relevant officers what that information is, and then something lands in everybody's inbox fairly quickly. But with these kind of items, you won't get that necessarily. So I think it's just to hopefully for the next cycle get that improvement in for the next cycle of meetings, and then when we come back to this one, we'll go, yeah, this is what happened after our meetings, and see how it's improved. But I think it's like a big learning step that we've just had from the last round of meetings.
I don't know what you're whispering about. Go ahead.
I was just saying that in the minutes, the action points are in the minutes, and it is, we generally chase those actions. So I was just saying to council, but I have got a note in my diary to chase the metropolitan housing actions next week. Donna's had to do a lot of background work. So I have made a note because I knew there was a lot. And Daryl did say, I have to say, Daryl did say, put another scrutiny request in.
I've just been reading through Daryl's notes, which do happen after the meeting. So what happens after the meeting is, just so that you're aware, is the lead officers will send me a list of, these are the things that were raised, these are the main questions. People were happy with this, people weren't happy with that. So I can tell you that perhaps the most startling thing in this email, apparently there were questions about the pet policy in relation to fish and hamsters. Is that true? Apparently there was conversation about pet policy.
Yeah.
So I do get some feedback, but I've got a bullet point here that says that you raised a concern about this coming back on a regular basis, and that officers are advised about filling in a new scrutiny request to do that. So we do get some updates. I don't get the impression from this feedback that I've got from the lead officer that the meeting, in your own words, didn't fill requirements of the scrutiny request, and that councillors were dissatisfied with what they'd been given to the point where they had a lot more questions than could be answered. So I can only go from the feedback that I've been given and the minutes. So I've also written another note. What does the minutes say? Because the minutes don't say we need more stuff.
Well,
we need a better system in place, because I don't know that you've had a dissatisfying meeting.
Prior to the officer sending that to yourself, that kind of then gets discussed or sent to the chairs and vice chairs prior to the lead officer then discussing with you, in case they then missed anything, or like the action point and that type of thing. Because I know the minutes are going to, I know it's the action points, but the minutes come out, and often you look at what those action points are. But with these kind of things, it's then knowing what happens with those action points and the follow up on those.
Yeah, but they were quick with yours. Donna has to do a lot of background work.
Yeah.
So just move on, really. Just to check, in terms of the looking at scrutiny within a year, not just the 2 hour period. So Charlotte, where are we with that? Were you going away to ask about that? I mean, the fact that everybody seems to be in agreement in this group that we would like things to be able to come back with a year, within a year.
The process for getting it changed would be part of the constitution review, which is the remit of the monitoring officer. So I will go back and have a word internally with officers and see how it goes. I have to say that I don't know anywhere else that in terms of their scrutiny would have things coming back more regularly. For example, this housing one that we're talking about, if you wanted it to come back, we need to know exactly what it is you're dissatisfied with, and we need to get them prepared. We need to get them to come to the meeting, and it's all of that. You're not giving them a chance to actually change anything that you've highlighted. So part of the reason why we give people this 2 years is also because there are lots of other things that we presume that you want to scrutinise, rather than only focusing on one thing. So there is a process for getting the constitution changed if that's what you want. What happens normally when there are big changes to the constitution is that we have a constitutional review group, which is a working group of governance. So let me at least start by having a word with the monitoring officer.
Moving on, the items on the agenda is feedback from lead officers. Is there anything that you'd like to add than what we've discussed on the previous item?
My feedback was going to be about the scrutiny review. And what I was going to say was, apart from feedback from two people who happen to be in this room this evening, that's all I've had. Two people. But you've actually given me more feedback this evening than I've received in any other place, for which I'm very grateful. But certainly from our point of view internally is, if we don't get the feedback that we're asking for, we can only assume that everything is perfectly okay. And that's the problem, is that, I'm sorry, but we're facing LGR. There will be a discussion about whether or not this scrutiny review is a priority, given everything's going to be upended within a 2-year period. And actually our resources may well be better spent focusing on the future and not what we have now, because what we have now has got a limited shelf life. So if you feel strongly about having a scrutiny review and there are things that you wish to raise, if there are examples of grid scrutiny out there that you have seen or heard about, then please let us know. If there are things we should be doing or changing or stopping, this is what I need to know. And whilst I've noted down the things that you've mentioned this evening, this isn't just about you, it's about your colleagues as well. And it was really, I'm going to put something in Councillors Connections this week that really says you need to be engaged in this process or the process is going to go away. And that was all the feedback I had, which didn't really seem then particularly helpful after our conversation we've just had.
Thank you. Right, going on to item 8 is consideration of scrutiny group work programmes. So first we'll go through each of the requests, which I believe from memory is there's 4. Or like but 3 different topics. So the first 2 requests are around the same topic, is around shared ownership and other types of affordable housing. The first request that we've got is from Councillor Thomas, Councillor Brown, Councillor Way, Councillor Billing and Councillor Rex Walker. And then the other request that we've had is from the Deputy Chief Executive and Director of Neighbourhoods, Dave Banks. So rather than going through all the differences in those 2 scrutiny matrices, what the kind of the 2 questions is for councillors of this group is, are we with this item coming to scrutiny, but then which request would then be used by officers, because it does have like what I would like to explore question in them.
Councillor Thomas has come. So the person putting in the scrutiny request has got 5 minutes as a maximum to tell us about it before we discuss it as a group.
Okay.
I'd just like to know why they think that their one should be accepted.
Yeah, I think that's a valid discussion point. Yes, I'm not planning on spending the rest of the evening, so don't do the scrutiny now. But in terms of if it helps you make a decision, that's fine.
If I can have a couple of minutes more, I can explain that to you, but if I explain the scrutiny request really. This has come about because it's about affordable housing. It's not about social rent. It's about the other types of affordable housing. It's come about for a number of reasons. One is that there was an article on the BBC about people who had shared ownership type of affordable housing who weren't happy with it, and there were very great issues. And the other reason it's come about is that I was fortunate enough to be in a meeting with one of the registered providers, not a housing association, and I understood a bit more about how this is happening. and I think it needs to be looked at. As you know, each development has to provide a certain amount of affordable housing. But within that affordable housing, there are different types, and only quite a small proportion of it is social rent, which is the one that goes through house-based choice-based lettings, and that Rushcliffe has nomination rights to put tenants into. The other sorts are varied and come from various government initiatives over the years. There's intermediate housing, which is shared ownership, so that people are part rent, part buy. There's discount market homes. There's something now called rent to buy. There are various of these schemes, and these are being rolled out across Rushcliffe using the valuable capital that is generated from developer contributions for affordable housing. And whereas Rushcliffe has quite heavy interactions, I believe, and understands the need for social rent, there's not much steer or guidance from Rushcliffe as to the types of these affordable housing products that are being rolled out and made available. It's decided between the developer and the registered providers that bid to for that affordable housing on the sites, and there are also, as I understand it, some government grants involved. And I think it's absolutely vital in Rushcliffe that we get the best value for our residents from this important resource, which is the affordable housing allocation that comes with developments. We need to understand what types are being rolled out, and we need to know what our residents need, and we need to be matching the need for these types of products to what is provided. Now, the reason there are two scrutiny matrices is that I did have extended discussions with officers about this, and I would say actually it's not just a communities issue, it is also potentially crosses into growth and development as an issue, because some of the tools that could be used to explore these things are planning policy tools like supplementary documents, the Greater Nottingham Strategic Plan, those sorts of things that understand what housing need is and what should be provided. So I think it's a crossover one between the two silos, if you like, of the council. So I did discuss it with officers from the community side, and made several changes to it. So it's more focused than it was. The officers wanted to provide a briefing document, but I don't think a briefing document necessarily gives councillors the ability to dig into something and find out what's happening and get the data that's needed and decide what should be happening. So we came to a compromise, or we tried to come to a compromise where some of it was provided in the officer report, some of the data was provided in the officer report, and some of it was for discussion, and we didn't agree. The officers are taking the view, and I quite understand it, that they have no control over what is a market process between the developers and the registered providers, but actually the fact that it is a market process doesn't mean that Rushcliffe can't be providing guidance as to what they think is needed, and there may well be points of interaction that could actually make that happen. If it turns out that you, as the scrutiny groups, don't actually want to ask those questions because the officers have no control over that issue, then that's fine. You don't ask any questions. It goes to scrutiny, and all those questions are not asked. That's up to councillors. But my point was that you needed the opportunity to actually ask questions on those issues, which is why I've put it down as briefing note for two of the points, and discussion and information in the report plus discussion for the others. some of the information is pure facts. What are the different types of affordable housing that are available, and what numbers of each type are allocated in the newer estates around Rush Clifford? That is fact. And so, you know, there's no, we don't have that fact. We need that fact. But the rest of it is something that I think there's probably the potential to dig a lot further into, which is why I asked for it to be a scrutiny item, not a briefing note.
Thank you very much, Councillor Thomas. Did you have any questions, Councillor Gaunt, or have they all been answered? Thank you. So I'll open to the councillors, being the kind of the first item. First question is about bringing it into scrutiny, and this request, and the proposed topic of scrutiny. So if councillors are happy for it to come forward, for this to come forward to scrutiny, can I have a show of hands? Thank you very much. And then it's just, as we've got two requests, is kind of going to councillors which request would they like to go through, and I'm presuming it is community, is it, that it would go under and go forward. So is there any kind of thing from councillors?
Are we saying trying to decide which one we would prefer?
Yeah, because we've got two.
Two.
We've got two on the same, which are the same
One is just
topic, but there's kind of the one request to go forward for officers to kind of use in order to collate the report.
Well, I would certainly prefer the one that actually goes to a scrutiny committee, so we can actually have the discussion on the points that have been raised. Am I presuming that the other one is just saying that it would be done through?
No, both of them go to scrutiny. So Councillor Thomas has outlined that she has had some conversations with officers. Officers attempted to say, look, we can take this to scrutiny, but there's an awful lot here. A lot of it's out of our control. And in order to be able to do the scrutiny of this, it's going to be something that happens over there in the future. But a briefing note, you're asking for information that we can put into a briefing note and give you up front. Councillor Thomas was not satisfied with that. She wants it to go to scrutiny. So both Councillor Thomas and Dave Banks revised the scrutiny request, hoping to come to a compromise about what can be provided in a briefing note up front and what needs to go to scrutiny. There isn't the idea from officers that it just doesn't need to go to scrutiny. We're happy for it to go to scrutiny. What we're saying is it's a long way off in the future. How about we provide information up front? There's a disjunct, if you read them word for word, between how the balance of information and what can be provided sooner rather than later.
I've read both the scrutiny requests, and my preference would be Councillor Thomas's request for scrutiny, simply because the questions are simple, bullet pointed, they're asking for more details, easier to understand, whereas the one, no criticism to Dave Banks, obviously not, but it's just that he's tried to amalgamate all the things in one question, not breaking it down into points, a little bit more trickier to understand. I like how clear-cut Councillor Thomas's scrutiny request is, so that's my preference.
Am I allowed to comment on this, being as my name's on this? I agree with what Councillor Perex just said. It's quite clear what the questions are in the scrutiny request that Councillor Thomas has spoken about. And I don't see the two things as mutually exclusive, because surely providing a briefing note is not that dissimilar to providing a report to the scrutiny group, because they would presumably answer the questions that are in here in their report. So I'm not really sure why there's two, but I think it's really, really important with this sort of thing that we're able to ask questions, because yes, you get a briefing report. How many of us have read a briefing report and thought, oh yeah, but what does that mean? And I'd like to ask about that, and so on. And it's almost like it then becomes a closed door. So I think it's really important that we have the ability to question these things.
If I'm understanding this right, what you're proposing is that as of now, we put out a briefing note. So that'll come out within 2 or 3 weeks.
I don't think so on this topic. No, this is quite complex. I don't think we've done that quickly.
Well, I'm assuming it would come before a scrutiny meeting.
Yeah.
So I can't see what would be wrong or harmful in putting out a briefing note. And if there were those questions, when the scrutiny meeting comes up, they will be in your bag of questions. Although you may find that they've now been answered along the way and are answered within the report. But it seems to me, yes, let's calm the waters with a briefing note and then have the scrutiny.
Okay. So there's two things there, isn't there? Can we have the briefing note without opting for Officer Banks' version? Because if he's able to produce that, do we need to use that version and take that version to scrutiny, or can we have a bit of both there? Can we have Councillor Thomas's scrutiny matrix coming to scrutiny with the support of that document that could be brought by the officers as well, so that we're doing both things? Because I was slightly swayed, I think, by Councillor Thomas's point about the officers believe that many of the things that we're asking for can't be solved by the market, or the market will solve those issues. And there are some of us who don't believe that can happen necessarily all the time, and there are others of the councillors who believe that is a good thing all the time. What she said really eloquently is that we can influence, hopefully, the market. So maybe surely it's important that we ask all the questions that Councillor Thomas and the others are bringing, so that we can steer these organisations, the developers and stuff, if we can, and see what we can do to steer them, rather than ignoring that option because it's out of our remit. So I was just wondering if we can accept the first one, but also request for the briefing notes that Councillor Cumbleback has mentioned as well. Like, can we have both without accepting the Dave Banks one? Is that a bit cheeky? And if so, I'd be supporting the first one.
That able to kind of form a recommendation of this request going forward.
Just to clarify, we want Councillor Thomas's scrutiny request with Dave Banks's briefing note as well.
Yes, that's what
We want it all.
Both.
Yes.
Basically, that's what's coming from councillors.
Yep, I've got it.
Okay. So I think we just have to show of hands of what we're kind of looking for. Thank you. Right, so going on to the third one. Yeah, we'll just make sure. Oh no, third one. Yeah, it is the third one. Around asylum dispersal and contingency accommodation to include HMOs. Councillor Phillips.
The reason I want to bring this subject to scrutiny came about after a planning application to convert a 6-bed HMO property on the quiet cul-de-sac of Heathercroft into a 7-bed HMO. The council did not inform me that this original 4-bed property had already become a 6-bed by means of converting the living room and dining room into bedrooms, so no actual living space at the property. This was done by permitted development without the need for a planning application. There is a total of 8 properties on Heathercroft, which is located in the heart of Compton Acres Estate. There are 5 4-beds, 2 3-beds and 1 bungalow. At the end of the cul-de-sac, there is a green space with a set of goalposts where young children and teenagers gather to play. There are 13 adults of voting age in 7 of the properties, some with children and grandchildren who regularly stay over. Then there are 6 young male asylum seekers at one of the properties who are of unknown origin and backgrounds. This is unacceptable on this family-orientated, once quiet cul-de-sac. Many complaints have been raised to Rushcliffe Borough Council and to Immigration and Serco about the antisocial behaviour coming from this one HMO. Littering, males taking showers in the garden, over 250 noise complaints and evidence of these asylum seekers illegally working whilst waiting to have their applications processed. Our local MP, James Naish, has met with myself and concerned residents about this situation. He shares our concerns about the inappropriate housing of single male asylum seekers in this location. After speaking with officers at Rushcliffe Borough Council, I am told the council has very little to no control over who Serco can put into HMOs in our borough. The system seems to be geared around the safety of asylum seekers and not the legitimate concerns of our residents. How can this be so? This council has nothing in place to stop a landlord turning a 4-bed property into a 6-bed HMO, which can be done under permitted development. Once a 4-bed property becomes a 6-bed, even with the Rushcliffe premium property prices, it becomes a very attractive proposition for an HMO. We appear not to be able to do anything to stop this from happening. If Rushcliffe Borough Council had an Article 4 directive in place, it would stop permitted development rights and mean a planning application would have to be submitted to turn a 4-bed into a 6-bed property. Without Article 4, Rushcliffe Borough Council has no control, and unscrupulous landlords and would-be landlords could just cash in on at the expense of our council tax-paying residents. You only have to turn on your TVs to see the whole country is in uproar and protesting over how and where asylum seekers are being accommodated. So far, Rushcliffe has managed to keep its head down, especially when you see what's happening in other parts of the country. It has not been a subject that we have had much discussion on until now, so this is no time to become complacent. As it becomes more and more difficult for the asylum dispersal programme to find suitable accommodation, and as other councils tighten up their policies, Rushcliffe could very easily become a soft target for Serco. We need to have robust measures in place to stop an influx of new HMOs being used by Serco to house asylum seekers in inappropriate locations within Rushcliffe. We must now bring the asylum dispersal and contingency accommodation plan, including HMOs used in Rushcliffe, to a scrutiny group. Serco should be invited to present to the group on how the system works and its appropriateness when housing asylum seekers. We need to understand why the system is geared only around the safety of asylum seekers and not the concerns of our residents. We need to scrutinise our planning system around HMOs and why we don't have an Article 4 in place so that we have some control of our own destiny. Asylum dispersal and contingency accommodation, including HMOs, is one of the biggest topics coming down the road at the minute. As councillors, we need to be in a position of knowledge, which will come about through proper training and robust scrutiny. This will ensure we are able to consult confidently with our constituents when they raise concerns on this very emotive subject. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Phillips. I'll open it up for the first question is about this coming to scrutiny. And that's kind of the question, so I open it up to councillors.
I have to say, I think it's an issue that, yes, we should be looking at. It's we're in difficult times, and we should know how Rushcliffe is supporting community and what we are doing.
Second, my question to clarify then about that is, so it's not that this, if we accept that this issue is something that we want to discuss at scrutiny, I think that's a really valid thing we need to be discussing, a very important issue. But do we have to accept this particular matrix as it's presented now in the format it's presented? Because there are some issues I have with this, not with the issue and not with what Councillor Phillips is trying to do. I'm not sure. I think this is doing it very effectively. So that would be my issue, and I don't know whether that's something I'd bring up now or whether I'll bring it up point, do we accept, if I accept that this is something I want to bring to scrutiny, and I think we should, do I then accept this? Or do I say at this point, no? I'm just looking for clarification. The issue is something we should bring to scrutiny. I agree. But is this scrutiny matrix something that we should be bringing, this particular one?
Okay, I think it would depend on your fellow councillors and how they view. So it's never come up before. We generally just accept what has been put forward. We have had an instance before where a piece of scrutiny, for example, would be going to your group and that you've got a view of some things that you would like to do. So therefore there's a conversation after the scrutiny request has been accepted to expand upon it to make sure it includes points that you feel need to be done. I see no reason why that shouldn't be done by this group, possibly after this evening, by working with Councillor Phillips and the lead officer for whichever group it goes to, which is probably going to be communities. I see no reason why you shouldn't expand it if there is a feeling that those points are valid to include. Because the alternative, the alternative is you say it's a really great issue, but we don't agree with the way that it's been put forward, or we think it needs to be rewritten, and we go away and we rewrite it.
I think it needs. Initially check, and are these things that we have any authority over whatsoever? Because there are some little bits in here that worry me, like for instance, just the overall, the question could have been something like, does the system only care about the asylum seekers, or is it also taking into account the views of residents, rather than assuming that it does not take into account the views of residents, right? So just from that particular one point, to me, puts me in a difficult situation, because I don't feel that we don't take that into account. I don't know. So that's what a question would have raised. The question would say, does the system that we currently have in place take into account the views of residents more than or is equal to asylum, the welfare of asylum seekers, for instance? That'd be one little thing there. I would ask questions about whether Serco is a reasonable company to be working with, because I've got notes here that say that in 2002 alone, the annual profits from this thing was £216 million that Serco made out of the asylum system. So to me, this is way bigger than this deals with here. And I think we miss a huge opportunity to help our residents and the borough itself, and we're talking about affecting planning choices and all sorts. If we take this as it is, I think we miss an opportunity to do a better, real solid look at this, because I think it's a hugely important issue. We have to think, if we've got such a huge backlog in the asylum system, because it's not been looked after properly over many, many years, and because of the current situation, I mean, where are these people going? What do we do? Like, so we do have to put people somewhere. We can't not put them in hotels anymore. That's changing. So we're going to have to look at where they go. And I think we need to sit down and go, this is a really serious issue. I mean, a really adult conversation about where people go. Are they going to go into communities? What safeguards are there in place? And I think that's starting to do that, but it isn't doing it.
I think that's where.
So I don't know. I'd be unhappy putting that. No offense. I'd like to work with you together, all of us, and think about how we can, if we can do that at this stage.
I think that's where it's, as you say, it's the post scrutiny topic that can be brought forward. But it's then kind of when it comes, because of course we haven't voted on it, bringing it in. So I'm talking hypothetically, but is those questions that get asked and those areas and how the topic gets scrutinised more around some of the questions, and that would be in conjunction with Councillor Phillips, who has put this request through, and then with the chair and vice of that of the group that it's then going to do, around how they would see and envisage the subject being scrutinised at committee.
I think I would agree with most of what's been said. I mean, Councillor Phillips has spoken obviously very well and very emotively about an issue in his ward, in his specific ward, and without a doubt, if that is causing problems within that area, and in terms of antisocial behaviour, that needs to be addressed. There's no doubt about it. I mean, I would certainly support Mike's point about Serco and what their role is, because yes, they are managing the system. They need to find the bed space, but they are also paid money to support asylum seekers, in not just dump them and leave them. Now, obviously, that's another issue altogether. But I have to say, in terms of how this, some of the language I find on this scrutiny report, not matrix now, well, it just sort of hits me in the face that we have to be very careful, and in terms of language, it is very powerful. And you know, why the system is geared only around the safety of asylum seekers and not of vulnerable residents is a very bold statement, and that, you know, I don't agree with that. And the appropriateness when housing asylum seekers, well, again, if we want to close the hotels, they have to go somewhere. It comes down to HMOs more than likely, because they're the cheapest form of accommodation that is available. I mean, in my ward and Trent Bridge, obviously HMOs have been an issue in the past, not with asylum seekers, with other residents that have been put in there, poor accommodation, poor management, and there has been obviously issues that it's been really difficult to address, because, you know, the systems, to be fair, obviously there's been a notice, something issued, but these are not terribly effective, and obviously that just causes the problem to irritate people even more. But I just think, and what we want as the outcome is to be better equipped to understand and deal with asylum dispersal and contingent accommodation, including HMOs, in our wards. There are other ways of getting to that point without having a scrutiny committee, and I'm just concerned about what we put forward, if it goes forward as a scrutiny committee, and how that is managed, really. Honestly.
I have experience in application for HMOs. My understanding is that Serco give us 7 days. They tell us proposed property. They give us 7 days as a council to reply to them, to say why we think it's good, why we think it's bad, what are the issues. So effectively a risk assessment on the council's behalf. It's a joint sort of group. It's the police as well, and a number of different agencies in there. But we're given 7 days. But at the end of the day, it's down to Serco to then to say yes or no. So it depends on the strength of the arguments that we put forward in the risk assessment. And obviously, there are some areas of Rushcliffe that are more vulnerable, for want of a better word, for these HMOs than other areas, you know, because of the access to facilities, to getting into the city, to, you know, to get into a chemist, onto a bus or whatever, compared to a rural area like mine, really. So yeah, it's a thorny subject, whether it's a scrutiny subject or whether it's because our hands are tied as a council. My understanding is that we have 7 days to respond, and it's fait accompli. It's down to Serco. I don't know what we could do. I wish we could do something. I wish we had more of a say. But until we get that information legally on how we can have more of a say, I don't know whether we can make a decision on whether something like this comes to scrutiny, because no point in scrutinising it if we can't do anything about it. So we need to get legal advice, really, as I see it.
It should then be that we go down that path and find out what position we can take, and then this may be a motion rather than a. Would it be a motion like this is rather than a scrutiny thing? Like, is it something that can be brought to full council as a kind of action for the council to do?
It would seem to me that a lot of what is being asked here is we just don't understand. We don't understand how this works. How did Councillor Phillips end up with this house in his ward? And now it's there. What support is being given to those people? Where do I take my concerns? How are the local residents being supported and such like? we accept that this is not something that we're doing to our residents. It's something that's being done to us and done to our residents with the best intention. As Councillor Plant says, that people have to go somewhere. We need to make sure they're supported. We need to get them into proper jobs and lives, and all of that takes time. I know that one of the things that has been discussed is, is this a training session? Do we need to increase your understanding and awareness of what's going on before you can say, do you know what, we're ready to scrutinise this, or it's a motion to council, or actually this sucks, but there really isn't anything we can do about it. So there is possibilities here to address this in a different way, or you can do it at scrutiny. But unfortunately, I think it will be one of those scrutiny things where you get an awful lot of chatting and not a lot of action at the end, because there's a limit to what we can do. It's about information awareness and giving you an opportunity to find out about what's going on and how those decisions are made.
These things ending up becoming a scrutiny matrices is because many of councillors who are not necessarily in the lead group feel powerless to bring things any other way. So when we're concerned about these issues and they're being brought to us by residents, we, as independents or as small minority parties and opposition groups, we bring something to council, and it's either a big argument and then we get nowhere and then it's not agreed, or it's done sort of collaboratively before if it's something that we can all agree on. But we feel powerless and we're told bring it to scrutiny then. So I don't, is there a way of, but I don't think this is something that we can just say no, it's not going to accept it and then that's the end of it. I think we do need to work with councillors if we don't accept it to scrutiny, because we don't see how it can come to scrutiny yet from what we've just heard. We make sure it comes somewhere else. Because like, well, what can we do? Training to me is a place where sometimes things go to die, isn't it? I don't mean that.
You're the teacher.
Yeah, well, to my world, yeah.
We clearly need some guidance from somewhere. And once we've got that, then maybe we can scrutinise what we're doing. But where could we get the guidance and information from? Is that for an officer to research and get it for us? Or is it outside organisation even?
I know that discussing this internally, I've got a note on the top of my page, hoping for somebody from Serco or Home Office to reply to email. So I know that there's been a request, potentially, if this gets approved, would you be able to send somebody to talk to the group? Nobody's even responded to the email yet. So one of the other things I've got written on top of my page is kind of big lead-in time. Can we do this in 6 months' time? Because we need to get people in and we need to inform not just ourselves, but make sure that you've got good information. And you're right, it doesn't necessarily come from officers, because they're not the right people, in the right positions to be able to do this, because we're not in control of what is happening here.
So that's going back to my point, is there's no point in scrutinising it. We have 7 days for a start. But what we need is a process as an organisation, what we do within that 7 days. And then we can scrutinise that rather than the outcome, because the outcome is going to be the outcome. Officers need the tools to enable them to do the job, the tools that we give them. So there needs to be a process, a system of on day 1, day 2, day 3, because to be fair, the officers did really well with when it came into my ward, because they were straight on to me saying, I'm letting you know about this, can you let me have your feedback? But I think this was more the officers saying, what do we do about this? Rather than a document saying, and then if we have a document, but we also have specialist lawyers look at the document to see what powers the authority can, in direction of Serco, then again, we're making a more powerful document. But at the moment, we've not got our hands on the steering wheel, I'm afraid, or the throttle.
Is it kind of, we look at how the processes and what we do as a council, because it is kind of, that's the real thing that we can influence, and what we do in this process, and the only kind of, as you've said, you're not kind of getting responses from these other agencies that are in this process to find out from them. And I suspect it might be quite a long time that you'll then get an answer for them to come if they were to. But it's once we get like a notification or something, what do we do as a borough council? What do officers do when kind of a HMO or something comes in?
Coming to the next community scrutiny, couldn't we then sit down and make those the questions on that, whatever that's now called, scrutiny report? Can't they be the things that we're going to ask? What do we do when we get a notification that Serco are looking to open HMO in the area? What's that? So like Councillor Sims was saying, what are our steps? And if we ask at scrutiny what our steps are, then we get a report at least of what they are, don't we? Or are you saying that we don't bring that scrutiny? We ask for that information. But like, what are we talking about?
That's brilliant.
Yep. My view is it should come to scrutiny, but not in its current form. It needs rewording. It needs changing some of the language that's been used. I agree with both Councillor Plant and Councillor Gond. I don't think so. Not coming to scrutiny is an answer here, because there are lots of things that I don't understand over here, the process, etc. And whilst we're scrutinizing the topic, we're getting all those answers as well. And from a legal point of view, I wonder, besides Serco, if we also have somebody from the council's legal team who's present at the scrutiny meeting to give us a legal overview and where we stand as a council when we are responding to Serco wanting to build HMOs, what powers we have.
I think that's kind of going on the questions that you would kind of then go and scrutinise, and you're starting to kind of ask the questions that would form the scrutiny of this subject. So that could be where it gets, as a topic, gets accepted to go to scrutiny. But like what's been outlined is the questions and how it gets scrutinised could then be discussed and then taken forward.
I make a proposal. So we have had this in the past. So in the past, we've had a topic come forward for scrutiny. I've been racking my brains and I don't remember what it was, I'm afraid. But the group said, we like the idea of the topic, but we don't like what's here. The focus isn't quite right. It needs adjusting. It got agreed in principle. And then everybody in the group that wanted to kind of contribute towards that got in touch with me. I set up a little working group with some officers as well. And they basically rewrote the scrutiny request. It came back to COG the following meeting and they went, we've agreed this in principle. And yes, now we're happy with the scrutiny request and the questions that have been. So a very light touch agreement. But given that it's unlikely, if you agreed this item today, I'm recommending this is January before we look at this. We've actually got time to do that without affecting the timescale, because we've already been in touch with people like Serco. We can continue to push those feelers out there and see who we can get to come in and talk to you at the same time as sharpening this up. And it doesn't affect the timetable overall, but you've agreed it in principle.
Councillors happy with that proposal to take it forward? That's what.
Does that mean that there's a minimal delay on this if you're saying it can come back fairly soon? Because I think this is going to be a problem or an issue rather, that's going to grow and grow. And leaving it months and months down the line is not necessarily going to achieve very much.
The next meeting of this group is the 18th of November. So I was drafting earlier on. So after you've met tonight, I was putting following councillors' connections. We've met. Next scrutiny requests are due in. The next scrutiny request deadline is the 24th of October. So we've got 5 or 6 weeks to really look at this. But the delay, as in when the item may be heard at scrutiny, if it's agreed in full at the next meeting, is the same whether you agree it today as it stands or whether you agree it at the next meeting, because it won't be before January. You have to allow enough time for this work to be done.
October community group meeting would be too soon in order to discuss this. So that's why it's being proposed that the next one is January. So it's the time, kind of a practical timescale, but it comes back to here to be then kind of ratified as a new matrix of how scrutiny would then look at the subject. So if with that way forward on this, that we're agreeing it in principle to go to communities and being earmarked for January. Okay, so we'll just have a show of hands to it. Any against or abstentions? Okay, thank you. Right, next request that we've got is for councillor Chapman review of debt collection agents by RBC in line with the outcome of the government's consultation on council tax and enforcement. So, open it up to the floor. I think this one would be communities again as well.
Chair, the one factor here is that there's currently a government consultation out on this. And so it's very much a case of we're happy to have a look at this as a topic, happy for it to be scrutinised, but we really would recommend postponing it until at least after next July, which is when the consultation responses are out, because we don't want to waste your time making a lot of changes for actual the national policy to change. We need to take that into account as well.
I agree with your view. Yeah.
So I'm sorry, not clear. So the government are doing some form of review or something on this.
There's a national consultation out
right.
at the moment. So we've been invited, as have all councils, to put forward their views. That's a process that takes time. So views get submitted, they all get analysed. There's some kind of discussion. Do we change things? Don't we change things? And how do we do it? Until that has been through the national process and they've come out the other side and said, we're happy with the way you're doing it, or we want you to make these changes. We don't know what we're doing. So you will be potentially scrutinising something that is going to change.
So, well, would we? Would it be something that was going to change? We would sort of be scrutinising what we're doing at the moment, wouldn't we? Wouldn't we?
I suppose it's that third outcome. The first of the 3 outcomes is the one that puts it into the long grass, isn't it? But then we look at the outcomes at the end. What outcomes are you seeking from scrutiny? The first one is the one that's going to delay this by a long period of time, isn't it? Whereas the second and third ones, for understanding what we currently do, understanding any outcomes which may impact on council tax debt collection. Those, if you could take the first one out, then we could look at it now, couldn't we? Sorry.
Oh, sorry, it's me.
Sorry, it's all right. So I was kind of supporting Councillor Plant's point that there's things on here that we could do with knowing quite right now, because there are people maybe who are suffering from some of these things that are happening or whatever. I think it might be useful if we could take it through in principle and then maybe look at that first bullet point of outcomes and just say, do we want that in or not? Because if we're accepting it with that first bullet point, then we have to wait until next October. But if we took that first bullet point out, we can find out where we are now and how, because if we wait until next October, there's a lot of people who we're not going to find out things for, and then this will all maybe go away in 2 years' time when we can actually affect that. You see what I mean? Like, so if we delay for no reason at all, the changes that you're talking about, the government consultation being in, will disappear or will not affect Rushden Borough Council.
Understand what you said. Where with the work programme and looking at the work programme, we've got an item potentially is for January. Then you potentially got shared ownership, which depending on how quickly and speedily it could be, would be January or April. Then you go in July for this subject, which is the meeting before anyway. And you could be getting councillors kind of thing, and it will be mentioned that there's the kind of the national consultation that's going on by the government on what changes there is. And then you kind of not knowing what those outcomes and that from government are, and what the government are then saying and how the government would like to see this subject going forward. So then potentially you're then going to be going, we want to scrutinise this in a year, in 6 months, years time, and what those changes are, and get an understanding of it. So what's kind of being proposed, what Charlotte's kind of put in the timeline is once all of that is done, then you scrutinise it, and the officers have then got everything and look at how those changes impact and change what we do as an organisation and what's being put forward from the government.
I understand.
Yeah.
Yeah. My view is take it as is and do it all in potentially in October 2026. Because also looking at the timeline of then when you'd get it in with the other requests.
So does that mean it's basically deferred but will be looked at? What does that mean?
It means that we've agreed it and it's on the forward programme. And at the next meeting, our little boxes on the work programme will extend into the following year. Just to make sure that we don't lose sight of it. But it's there. We can't do anything about it. Now, the only thing I will say as a caveat is if the government don't stick to their own timetable, which of course they're never, ever going to do. They always stick to their timetables, of course. We may well be coming back and saying, do you know what, when we review the work programme in 6 months' time, if we know there's a delay, then we're going to need to say to you, that's great, but we might need to be moving it on a little bit further on. Just because it's dependent on their work rather than us setting the timetable.
So can I have a show of hands to accept? Thank you very much. And the final one is around West Bridgford customer contact point. And again, this is from Councillor Chaplin, and again, this would potentially go to community, which is a review of the contact point and how it's been in West Bridgford since it's gone into the library.
I would support this certainly. It's obviously happens now in my ward, so I go into the library quite a lot and see it in situ. And it is, I think it's a year, or is it just over a year since it's moved? So I think it's a good time to look as whether it was a good move. You know, is it working? Is there issues? Are the numbers up? Are the numbers down? I just think it's something to be looked at. I mean, we need to ensure that people can contact us and in as easy a way as possible.
Yep, I haven't got any problem going forward.
Is this not covered in the customer feedback annual report?
No, it's not.
It's not.
No, customer feedback annual report, which is coming to this group next time round, is the balance between the complaints that the council's received and the compliments that it's received. But it mainly focuses on the feedback we get by form of complaints and where they fall, and the LGO.
Wasn't there another one that we put out, another survey we put out to analyse our customer services and how well we're doing?
We have scrutinised in the past the delivery of the customer access strategy and customer access, and we delivered that was looking at all of the different contact points and the different ways that people can contact us. Ed came to communities probably about 18 months ago.
Yeah, that's what I'm probably thinking. I was thinking that we already did this.
So
Right.
some of the questions are covered in,
Sorry?
some of those questions are covered in this, but not what the overall kind of matrix is, request is kind of looking at and requesting to be looked at. So unless got any kind of, again, can I just have a show of hand to accept, and it'll go to community. Thank you very much. So that's all of the requests. So just going on to the work programme, we've got for corporate overview group, the next one being the 18th of November. Standing item feedback from the scrutiny group chairs, lead officer, consideration of scrutiny group work programmes, financial and performance management, and then the rolling items, customer feedback, annual report. Then governance. Next one is 25th September. Risk management update, going concern, capital investment strategy update, internal audit progress report, and we haven't had anything onto the programme for governance this evening. With growth, we actually haven't got anything for the next meeting on the 22nd of October. We've had no items to go to that meeting, so it's being proposed to cancel that meeting due to workload, or no lack of workload for it, I'm afraid. And then with communities, the next one is on the 16th of October, and at the moment it's got the Rushcliffe flood risk update. So I would presume that none of the other requests will be able to go to October in order to get the information, unless the contact point wouldn't, would it?
No, I think it's more a case of the Rushcliffe flood risk update. I've got it down as a standalone item, certainly based on the conversations about flood last time round, and the amount of interest from councillors. I think it needs to be something on its own.
So, and then, so we've then got shared ownership, the request, which we would look at potentially.
We're looking potentially at mid 2026, so I've got it down in pencil down for July next year.
July. And then we've gone with HMOs, would be with January, was it?
That one could be in January, which allows us to bring a revised scrutiny request through next time round.
Yep. And then we, sorry, didn't write it down. The review of the debt collections being October 26, and then the final one being the West Bridgeford contact point. Potentially.
We potentially got that one down as April at the same time as the carbon management plan, because that's something you pick up on each year. So
Yeah.
would hopefully, as the programme has moved forward, we can get through that item a little bit quicker.
Unless there's any comments.
Councillor.
Is there, you say you've put the thing you've briefly called shared ownership. You've said you put that in July. Is there not space for it earlier than that? If the carbon management plan is a quicker one now, is there not space for it in there?
I have to say, I assumed you would want it as a standalone item.
Well, I don't know, it's standalone versus, can I take some advice on this? Standalone versus a long delay. Picture.
Councillor Waysman on the.
She doesn't know what I'm going to say.
Yeah, can you come back to the microphone?
The shared ownership one is a crossover item between communities and growth and development, and it could go to growth and development. That would be my suggestion.
I don't actually disagree with that. However, I've been advised it needs to be at least mid 2026 to enable officers to provide you with the information that you're seeking based on other workloads and other pieces of scrutiny that are coming through.
So in order to get the information for it, you probably are then looking at July 26th for a joint meeting like we had on the housing.
That does seem.
Yeah, can I just say, given that we don't have any agenda items for growth and development, and say if we did have any items for that, officers would be really busy preparing for that anyways. So why can't we have it sooner, given that we don't have anything else?
Even if we give it to growth and development, and I can see that there's a crossover in both, officers still don't have the time to do the work to bring it to you earlier than the middle of next year.
I can't say I feel very happy about that at all. And looking around the room, I'm just interested to know how other people feel about it.
I know carbon management is an annual thing, and I don't know how, whether again the powers of this group or how we feel, but could that be in the middle of next year and we bring forward this item instead of the carbon management plan?
So you are saying like to put carbon management to July 26, and then potentially go with the March growth and the April communities, then being the joint one.
Can I just clarify, was it a conversation that this item could go to either group? Because that was my understanding, rather than a joint meeting. In which case it can go to March or July in growth and development, and carbon management can stay where it is. I will try my best.
Right, unless there's any other questions.
Just say one thing, and I forgot to say it. When we have the scrutiny request forms, we no longer have a matrix, do we? And yet at the bottom of the scrutiny request form, we say matrix developed in conjunction with.
Good spot. I get that changed.
How many years is it that I've tried to get rid of that wretched word?
I've got nothing else on the agenda now, and I close the meeting at 21:46. Thank you very much, councillors, for your time tonight.